Hi, my name's Robert Reynolds, R-O-B-E-R-T-R-E-Y-N-O-L-D-S. I'm a former BorgWarner employee. I worked there from 90, it was probably 98 to about 2001, about 3 years. So, got a lot of good memories. Kind of hated to see the job go. I'm currently, working 2 jobs to try to supplement that income and make it work. And definitely don't have the benefits I did, and don't have the protection, I guess, that I did. And it definitely makes you think, be thankful for what you did have, and see the differences. I work at 2 non-union shops now, and there's huge differences between the 2, definitely.
Can you talk about some of the differences?
A lot of the differences, you don't have the representation that you had in the union jobs. There, if you had a problem, you could go to your union steward, shop leader, and they would kind of discuss it in a committee. You'd sit down with them, and if you had a problem with production or the job in general. You don't have that so much in non-union shops. Both of the places I work use what they call an open door policy, where they say, you can come in and talk to us about anything, but that's not always the way it works. I mean, you can go in there and talk to them about anything, but then you may not have a job the next day, when you do. So you have to watch what you say, and you have to watch what you do, and that's not necessarily a bad thing either. There were a lot of things that people got away with in union jobs that they don't get away with here. And there's a lot of things that people get away with here that you wouldn't think they'd get away with. And I work with a lot of interesting people, and the union to me was more about the representation, about you had somebody watching your back. If you had a problem, a family issue, I know my last year working there, I was going through my divorce, and any normal job, they probably would have fired me. I mean, I missed a lot of work, left work early, just a huge emotional time for me, and it was really a hard struggle. But the union stood up for me, and they helped. They got me into counseling, so I could talk through a lot of those issues. And so there's differences there. I don't know that these places that I work for now would be willing to do that. You miss a couple days' work, they're ready to fire you. So. And there's a big difference there. I think the representation's huge. Obviously, the loss in pay, I mean, the 2 jobs I work now don't really compensate for what I was making at BorgWarner. I mean, I haven't worked for BorgWarner in, 10 years, so I've made that adjustment. I've held a lot of different jobs in between there. I mean, I've done everything from delivering pizza to carpentry work to just general maintenance, and now I'm doing order fill for a distribution center. So there's and you don't have that job security where you had in the unions. Or we thought we had. You don't have it anymore. But at one time when I started, there was huge job security. You didn't have to. You might get laid off. That was kind of part of the game. You knew within the first 5 years you may be laid off 3 of the 5. But you knew that in the long run, once you got your foot in the door, the longevity of it was phenomenal. Both of my grandfathers retired from there. My father retired from there. I had aspirations of retiring from there. It just didn't work out that way.
Can you tell us, where were you born?
I was born in Muncie, Indiana, at Ball Memorial Hospital. Born and raised here. Lived here for 25 years, and I met my current wife. Actually, she was going to Ball State, and once she graduated, she became a teacher and started teaching in the Anderson community schools. And we moved to Anderson, lived there for about 3 years, and knew that we didn't want our kids necessarily going to that school corporation. So we started looking around. We ended up settling in Pendleton. We've been in Pendleton for 3 years now, and love the school system. It's a four-star school corporation, which is, for her being a teacher, that was like her main thing, make sure that our kids are taken care of. Um, and so we both work hard for everything we have, and, we still struggle like everybody else does. There's nothing given to you. You got to work for everything, and it's kind of the way I was brought up. You work for everything. I mean, I can remember when I was younger, my dad working 3 jobs, and a lot of that was because, starting out in the union, you knew that you were going to be laid off. I mean, it was just inevitable. So he also worked at Sears, and he worked volunteer at the ambulance service, and he did that for years and years. So, I work 2 jobs now, and I don't, I don't feel bad for it, or I just feel as it's part of what I have to do as a leader in the family. My wife works hard, and that's a big difference in today's times too. Because I remember, my mom held a few odd and end jobs here and there, but she didn't work full time. I mean, she was a full-time mom, and that's something that our kids and future generations will never see. And I think our society suffers for it. I mean, the overcrowding of the prisons and stuff, I think that's a direct reflection, because you can't afford to have just one income families anymore. I don't know of any job that can really afford that unless you're an executive in some corporate company. And, when I was doing construction work, we worked at a lot of big homes in Geist and Fishers, and and a lot of those families there are 2 income families. I mean, the husband and wife both work. So I think it's just a direct reflection of the way things are going, the economy, and I think a lot of it has to do with the decent jobs are just not out there anymore.
Was it just the school system that brought you to Pendleton? Why didn't you stay in Muncie?
Well, I didn't stay in Muncie because, frankly, there's just no jobs here. Nothing substantial. I mean, I could have delivered pizzas. I could have, I used to manage the Blockbuster. I could have done stuff like that, but nothing that was going to pay me substantially enough to take care of my family. We moved to Pendleton because at the time I was doing construction work. We did a lot of window repairs, wood windows, and replacement of doors and windows, siding, things of that nature. Most of my work was in Indianapolis, Carmel, Fishers, Geist, kind of the north side of Indy. My wife was working in Anderson, so Pendleton was kind of a nice spot in between both areas for us. Now recently I got laid off 2 years ago, roughly 2 years ago, about 1.5 years now, from the company I was working for, and it was a small company. There's only about 6 of us working there. Husband and wife owned it, and it was really a great place to work. I mean, it wasn't union by any stretch of the imagination, but he was the type of boss you could go to and tell anything to. He was a good Christian man, stood up for his beliefs, stood up for his employees, stood behind his product, stood behind his workmanship, and I really enjoyed working for him. Unfortunately, with the economic times the way they were, he just couldn't afford to keep going the way he was. What he ended up doing was just going sole and proprietors, where the people were subcontracting basically for him. I don't have a truck or anything. I was working out of my car. I mean, I kept all my tools in my trunk and everything. I didn't have ladders and stuff like that, so it just wasn't feasible for me to subcontract out for him. And I was the low man. I was the last person he hired in, so I had worked for him for about 2 years, and everybody else had been there for 5, 6 years. So, the odd man out, and but there's no hard feelings there. I still call him and talk to him, and if I need a prayer, he's one of them I call and ask. He's a good guy, and I completely understand where he's coming from. So. Wish I still had the job because I was making pretty good money there too. So, there's just really nothing in Muncie anymore. I mean, Muncie is a chain of restaurants, and that's pretty much it. All the big corporations have moved out. I mean, BorgWarner's gone. You've got, really Ball Memorial Hospital and Ball State University are really what's holding this community together right now. And unfortunately, they just cannot employ enough people to keep the town running, you know. And those jobs are hard to come by. I mean, I've applied at Ball State and different places. They have a long waiting list to get in those places. But I mean, you look at like the Ball company, glass company, you know, it's not here anymore. BorgWarner's not here. Warner Gear or New Venture Gear went out. They used to make transmissions here, or transfer cases. I think it's transmissions. They're no longer here. That was a union shop as well. So there's just I mean, if you look around Muncie, really all you see are restaurants, and that's pretty much it. I mean, Walmart and Meijer, you know, if you want to work for $8, $9 an hour, you can go to work for them, but it's just not enough to substantially keep uptake on a family, you know. And in my case, I have 2 children from my first marriage that I've got to take care of as well, which, you know, I don't mind doing. That's my responsibility. But you know, to pay out a couple $100 every week, you know, plus try to make enough money to support my family now, you really need, you know, 2, sometimes 3 jobs to make that work. So, and you just can't find that here. So,
what do you think is going to happen to Muncie with the closing of BorgWarner? You mentioned all the other factors that have closed. What do you see for the future of Muncie?
I think Muncie's future is very bleak, to be honest. I hate to see it. I mean, like I said, I was born and raised here. I went to Delta High School. Love the school corporation there. But I just don't, unless they get some businesses in here where people can make a decent living, I really don't see a future for them at all. I mean, if you look, Marion, Indiana, Anderson, Indiana, Muncie, they're really declining. I mean, Marion's pretty much a ghost town right now. When I worked for Blockbuster, I was a store manager at their store there in Marion, and there's nothing there. I mean, nothing, absolutely nothing there. And the economics there in that town are just so dismal. I mean, people are suffering huge. Now, I know Walmart opened up a distribution center there in Gas City, and that might help things out a little bit. But you need more of that. You need a lot more of that. And I just don't see, you know, here in Muncie, property values, and it's just not a good place. Businesses don't want to come here, you know. They've seen what's happened to the New Venture Gears, the BorgWarners, the Ball companies, and you know, what's their incentive, what's their motive to come here? I think there's a lot of great people here in Muncie. I've got a lot of friends here. I've got friends that I went to high school with that are in the police department. I've got friends that work for the ambulance service. And there's a lot of good people, a lot of hardworking people, a lot of people that really do care. But how do you show a corporation that? You know, how do you walk in their door and pitch that? I think that's something that your congressman, your city and town council have to do. And until you get the right people in that situation, you know, and unfortunately it's a big guessing game, you know. Politics is an ugly thing because you're hearing what they think of themselves, not necessarily what other people think of them. And, you know, you just hope that you're picking the right person to represent you and not somebody that's just there to line their own pockets.
What do you think about, do you have any thoughts about Brevini, the kind of the green energy thing, you know, they're going to make gears for windmills? Are you going to put an application in out there?
As far as Brevini goes, to be honest, I'm not real familiar with it. As far as putting an application in out there, it's a possibility, I guess. I haven't thought too much about it. Like I said, the distribution center that I work at, I'll have my 90 days in on the 3rd, which means a pay raise, and then I'll get another pay raise 6 months after that. So I mean, I'll be making decent money there, and they've got insurance and benefits, and I really like what I'm doing. Obviously, I'd like to make more money, as everybody would, but I also know that you can't be too greedy right now. And if you can find a place that you enjoy going to and getting up every day and you don't dread going in there, you know, sometimes it kind of outweighs the pay sometimes, so to speak. I mean, obviously everybody wants to make more money, but in my eyes, is $2 an hour more worth being miserable for the rest of your life? You know, I'm at the point, you know, I'm 36 years old. I'm at the point in my life where the decisions I make are based solely on my family. And, you know, I've got to do what's best for them. And is it going to be best necessarily to start all over and start a new job? Maybe not, you know. I am a little bit fortunate that my wife does work and she has a good job. Unfortunately, her health's failing and we don't know how much longer she's going to be with us. So, you know, those are all things you got to take in perspective. So, you know, with age comes wisdom, and, you know, I've made plenty of mistakes in my life, and made a lot of them when I was working at BorgWarner. And like I said, without that union protecting me, I don't know where I'd have been. And without the love and support of my father, I definitely don't know where I'd have been. So.
Well, what kind of mistakes, if you don't mind going into a few things?
No, you know, if you know, as far as my mistakes go, if it benefits other people, I'm all for it. I've come from using drugs, marijuana, and went from that to drinking about a gallon of whiskey a day, and I mean 80 proof stuff, not anything light, to the point where, you know, when you wake up, that's the first thing you've got to do is take a drink, because you're just so miserable with your life, so miserable with you know, your job, and it's a bad scenario, you know. A lot of that transpired when I lost my job at BorgWarner. I was also going through my divorce. You know, those are all excuses. You know, that doesn't make anything that I did right. But you know, I have a lot of issues with my older children. You know, it's hard when you live, you know, 3 cities away to always be there for everything for them. You know, I try to call them, you know, and I try to be there, but during those times when I was using the drugs and was using the alcohol, I wasn't there. You know, I wasn't who I am now. I was some alternate person. And I was on suicide watch when I was going through my divorce. I was driving around in my truck with a loaded 9mm, drinking, smoking marijuana, and this is, my dad had me locked up because he was afraid that I was going to kill myself. And at the time, I hated him for it. You know, I didn't want anything to do with him. And I just had this talk with my oldest daughter not too long ago. But now I look back on it, and if he hadn't done that, if he hadn't shown that love, I don't know, I probably wouldn't be here. I mean, that's just the way things are. And it took that, and, you know, I asked him a couple years ago, you know, well, why did you do that? You know, how could you lock your own son up? And he said that, you know, he had a friend that he worked with at BorgWarner, and he was talking to him when I was going through my trouble, and he told him, he said, you know, my son was going through pretty much the same thing. And he said, I didn't do anything. He killed himself. So, you know, my father said, you know what, you being angry at me, even if you never spoke to me again, it would be worth having you around than not having you here. So, you know, and it's hard for me to talk about this stuff. It's hard to look back and say, well, I really screwed these things up. But, you know, if it helps, it helps. And, you know, my older daughter, she's 17, and, you know, she's going through a lot right now. She's going through her senior year. She's got a lot of issues in her life. And, you know, I came up to Muncie, it's been 2 or 3 weeks ago, because her mom took her to the hospital because she thought she was just having a nervous breakdown. So, you know, I was trying to explain to her that there's a lot of people that love you, and, you know, I would do whatever it takes, you know, and if it means having you committed or you know, moving back, if that's what it takes, that's what I'll do. And a lot of that comes from my father, you know. He led the way, you know, and like I said, nothing that I've done in my life is excusable, or you know, I don't want anybody to feel sorry for me, because I've made those poor decisions. Those are all my mistakes. But I've learned from them, and I've grown from them. I think it's definitely made me a better person, a better man, a better husband, a better father, better employee, you know. And I think that's part of the growing period. You know, you have to, you know, maybe I had too much too soon. You know, when I got my job out of BorgWarner, I'd finished high school. I'd went to Indiana Business College. I got my 2-year degree there, and then I went right into work. You know, and I'm making $18, $23 an hour, making more money than I know what to do with. You know, so you just start doing stupid things. You know, and then, you know, you have a string of bad things happen to you, and you start blaming God and the wrong people, and you know, and you start making excuses for yourself, and you know why you are the way you are. And it just really comes down to, you know, are you going to step up and be a man and take care of your responsibilities or not? You know.
In that large group of guys out of BorgWarner, did you find some guys who also like to kind of party like you did? What kind of environment did you have there? Did you have some friends that also pushed you along that you worked with? Or?
Oh yeah, yeah. A lot of my partying actually started when I was going to Indiana Business College. But when I got to BorgWarner, oh yeah. I mean, you'd see guys go to their lockers with half soda cans and fill them up. You know, they were drinking on the job. You know, you could walk outside and be a big group of guys smoking marijuana out there. You know. But that's not any different than any of the other places I work today. You know, if people are in that mindset and that's what they want to do, that's what they're going to do. You know, I could take you to Walmart on third shift when I go in there, and I guarantee you 3/4 of the people there smoke marijuana. You know, they go out on their breaks. But, you know, to each their own. You know, I try to talk to some of them and let them know from my personal experiences that it's not going to get them anywhere. But how can you deny somebody that when they're working for $8 an hour? You know, what do they care? You know, you're going to take your job away from them? They're making $8. You know, McDonald's pays that. You know, it's sad. It's not. It doesn't make it right. It's not a good excuse. But you know, I've got a couple guys that I've talked to, and you know, tried to tell them, man, that's not how, you know, you really want to be. And you know, and you try to use the job thing. You know, you don't want to lose your job over something stupid like that. And you know, and they always come back, well, I'm making $8, so what does it matter? You know.
How did the union and management out of BorgWarner address kind of alcohol and drug problem within the factory?
Well, as far as BorgWarner and management addressing it, again, this is one of the downsides to the union. You are protected. So if you did get caught, what they would do is send you through a treatment program, which I think's great. But I don't know that there was ever any real follow-up with it. You know, after you went through the treatment, it's not like they were doing randoms on them, you know, making sure that they're staying clean, which I think was a serious poor judgment call, you know, on that regard. And again, I don't know how much the union had to do with that. You know, I don't know how much they said, well, you're not going to badger our employees, because that was part of it. You know, part of the strength of the union was you didn't let the corporate guys, you know, beat up on your fellow employees, you know, whether it was work related, outside of work. And I don't know, I mean, I have an instance where I recall an employee, and this was probably within the last year I was working there, got caught selling marijuana. And I mean, It was in the paper. I mean, they confiscated, they took everything from him. He had probably 6, 7, 8 motorcycles. They took his house, all his cars. The picture in the newspaper showed a kitchen table stacked probably 4 or 5 feet tall with bales of marijuana, cash, guns. You know, they took it all, yet he kept his job. You know, so people look at that and they say, well, you know, if this guy is going to be selling it and get caught with, you know, 7, 8, 9 pounds of marijuana, and he's going to be able to keep his job, you know, why do they care about me if I buy half a bag a week? You know, I'm just a user, I'm not a supplier. So again, you know, you can look and you can point fingers, but you really don't know. You know, I don't know. I don't know that necessarily that was the union's fault. I don't know if that was the company's fault. I kind of think it was a little bit of both. I mean, it was that, I think it always should have been coming together and meeting at a common goal for the betterment of the company. You know, but it always seemed like it was more at he said, she said, you know, let's be at odds. You know, they don't want to give in because they're greedy and they want money. You know, well, the corporation doesn't want to give in because they want more money in their pocket and they don't want to pay us for what we're doing. You know, so I think that whole scenario was kind of a bad thing. And I don't think that's, I don't believe in my heart of hearts that that was the way the union was designed. I don't think it was designed to be at odds. I think it was just designed to have fair wages for an honest day's work and to have representation for people that wouldn't necessarily have representation. You know, the problem with the non-union shops I work at now, if I walk in there and wear a t-shirt that says Budweiser or, you know, screw the world or whatever I, you know, want, they can fire me over that. They can send me home over that. You know, is that necessarily right? I don't think so.
How did you get along personally with management while you were at BorgWarner? I know it wasn't very long, but what were your interactions like?
I never really had any problems with management, but I came to work and did my job, and I, you know, kept a low profile because, you know, I was into the marijuana and the drinking, so, you know, I didn't go around them too much. There was a gentleman that my dad was really good friends with. His name was Ed Besser, and when I first started, I was in, I guess it was their maintenance department. I worked in a station where the machines needed oil and stuff. I took this little expediter and ran down, and Ed was always great to me. You know, he told me that you know, you just come in and do your job and they'll leave you alone. And I find that true. I mean, in the jobs that I'm working now, I find that true. If you come in and work for them, they're not going to mess with you. You know, they're going to leave you alone. They're going to take care of the people that take care of them, because everything rolls downhill. And they've got a supervisor, you know, beating up on them over things. And if they're not beating them up over the things that you're doing, then they're fine with you. You know, you know, and that was always my thing with the union too. Is I thought the representation and stuff was great, but it always seemed like they were representing the people that were always in trouble. You know, the people that were doing their jobs and staying clean and staying out of the way were kind of being swept under the rug because of all these people that are causing all this mayhem and all these problems. They're having to keep going back over and fighting and fighting and fighting for them. You know, and again, that's what it's all about. But I think you have to choose your battles too. And you know, my dad was a union steward for years, and I think that was probably eventually part of his downfall when they voted him out, because, you know, he would just tell people, quit being stupid. You know, you've got a family, you've got a life, you know, why would you ruin all that over alcohol, you know, or cocaine or whatever it is that you're into? You know, it's not worth it. You know, you're screwing up your life, you're screwing up your family, you're going to end up losing your job. Is that, you know, is that high? Is that worth it? You know, when you come down, your problems are still there. You know, if I've learned anything from my mistakes, I've learned that. Everything's still there. You know, that's why you stay drunk all the time, is because you just don't want to come down, because you know that your problems are going to be there when you come down. And it's just a huge revolving window.
Do you think that, now it sounds like the union represented your interests. You were, in a sense, I'm not a troublemaker. It sounds like you try to keep your head down, but you say you were drinking and stuff on the job, so you were one of those guys. It's interesting to hear you say that that the union kind of was spent a lot of time dealing with folks who were, you know, troublemakers. When it sounds like you might have been one of them in a sense.
Yeah, absolutely. I believe that the union did spend a lot of time with the people that were causing trouble for themselves. You know, not necessarily unprovoked. You know, stuff that they were bringing upon themselves, and I absolutely fell in that category. Absolutely. The difference was I didn't make mine known. You know, like I said, my dad worked there, my grandfathers worked there. I guess I didn't want to shame them in that fact, you know, so I kept a very low profile when stuff like that, you know, and I wasn't blatant about it. I didn't do too much of it at the shop. You know, when I went into work, I went into work. It was usually beforehand, right after work, but I didn't, you know, I was making good money. I didn't want to give them any reason to let me go. You know, there towards the end, when you knew the writing was on the wall, that changed a lot. And that changed a lot of people's perspective too, you know, because they knew we were screwed either way. So, you know, a lot of people just had that, what difference does it make attitude. But yeah, I think the union spent a lot of time with, you know, people such as myself that were a little more blatant, didn't necessarily care as much. You know, and again, a lot of people, you know, everybody goes through hard times, whether it's a death of a family member, whether it's a divorce, you know, any tragedy you can think of, you know, everybody goes through that. And you got to figure BorgWarner at the time employed about 7,500 people. So that's a lot of issues for people to be going through. You know, you had people worried about losing their homes, losing their cars, losing, you know, their families. And that was the great thing about the union. They did stand up for you. They did help you out. If you had a problem, I'd been to many union meetings, and it seemed like every union meeting, somebody was standing up, you know, their wife was going through chemo treatments. The insurance would only cover so much. Union would dig into their pockets and pay that. That was the great thing about them. You know, they would take care of those people in that sense. You know, I don't want it all to sound like I'm anti-union, because I am far from anti-union. I'm very pro-union. I just think that there are a lot of issues, and I think until the upper people in Michigan, Detroit realize that, things are just going to get worse, and it may be too late now anyway, in all truth. I think they could have salvaged this a long time ago. I think that, that they could have backed down on certain things. They could have been a little more strict. I think the caring of the people was a great place to start, but I think somewhere along the way it kind of got carried away to the extent of, you know, are we taking care of these people because it's the right thing to do, or are we just taking care of these people to take care of them? You know, I think taking care of the people because it's the right thing to do, because of necessity, things that they're going through in their life, I think that's great. If you're, you know, and getting somebody help, I mean, addictions are addictions, and they're just as evil as anything else. And no matter how they got started, you can fix those if the person wants the help. And I think, you know, the union stepping out and trying to help those people, like I said, I don't know about the follow-up on it. I don't know how well the follow-up was. But I think their intentions initially were good. You know, they wanted to help the people get off the alcohol, the cocaine, the marijuana, whatever it was, whatever their issue, whatever their little niche was, they wanted to help the people, you know, cure them, get them off that. But being an addict and being an alcoholic, I can tell you, unless they want help, you're not going to help them. They got to help themselves. And it took me almost losing my second wife to realize that. I mean, hitting the bottom and seeing there was only one place to look, and that was up. You know, and knowing that I was going to lose everything all over again. And this time it was self-inflicted. The first time it wasn't. You know, I mean, I made mistakes. I was young, but this was truly, truly self-inflicted. And, you know, it took her standing up to me and saying, I am not going to enable you anymore. You're going to stand up for yourself or I'm walking out the door. And that's what it took for me. And does that mean that that's the way it works for everybody? No. I don't have all the answers. I wish I did. I'd be in a better place if I did. But, you know, everybody's different. So what works for one person necessarily doesn't mean that's going to work for the other person. But I truly believe that if you want help, it starts inside. It starts with you. You have to say, I have a problem. I want the help. And then I think that's where then the union being the union really could have helped, because they should have said, hey, this person came to us. We didn't come to them and say, you're doing this or it's your job. Because I don't think that helped those people. You know, I think in some instances it may have been better for them to lose their job, to see what they're losing. Then the union, you know, once they got cleaned up and came, you know, they could have maybe got them back. But I don't know. You know, I'm not going to sit here and say I have the answers or I'm going to second guess everything that they did, because that's just wrong, you know. I honestly believe the union's great. I believe they did a lot of great things. Did they make mistakes? Sure. Everybody does. You know, there's not anybody who's going to sit here and watch this documentary that's going to say they haven't made a mistake. And if they did, I'd really like to meet them, because I've never met anybody like that before. So.
Family seems to have kept you in check a little bit, and you know, we've sat down with a lot of people who were multi-generational. You know, their father, their grandfather. You know, obviously you've got a father and grandfather that worked there, two grandfathers. Do you think, were there a lot of people that hired in around the time that you hired in that were in the same situation, that they had other family members, or did it become a little different toward the end there?
Yeah, when I hired in, really the only way to get on there was to know somebody, which is kind of sad, but they believed in taking care of their employees, and then that's kind of the way it works. I mean, you didn't necessarily have to be related to them, but you really had to know somebody. I was very fortunate in the fact that, well, both of my grandfathers worked there, my father worked there, I had a great uncle that worked there. I knew a lot of people. And a lot of the guys that hired in when I hired in, their dads worked there, their grandfathers worked there. So yeah, it was a very family-oriented company at one point in time, and I had friends whose fathers worked there that came to work there. But yeah, and for me, family is very important. Family's gotten me through all of my life's issues. I mean, if I have a problem, my dad's the first person I call and the last person I talk to. And I'm very fortunate, and I thank God for that. I'm very fortunate for the grandparents I have. My grandfather, Osborne, is a very religious man, and they helped raise us. And my brother's a pastor, and I honestly believe that a lot of that has to do with their upbringing and their beliefs. And like I said, family is very strong for me. I mean, my parents are divorced, but I've got great step-parents, and I've got great grandparents, and they've always been there. I mean, my dad and stepmom still live here in Muncie, and they look after my kids, you know, because I can't always be here. So my stepmother makes sure that my kids don't go without anything, and that my kids know about everything. And, you know, if they're angry with me and not speaking with me, she makes sure to let them know that, you know, they're still part of this family. They're still loved and cared for. So yeah, family is very important to me. And I think family was very important to BorgWarner at one time. And I think that's why you had a lot of guys took pride in their work. They took pride in the ownership of working there because their fathers, their grandfathers, their uncles, aunts, cousins, nieces, nephews, they worked there. You know, we were a family in more ways than one, and we looked out for each other. My stepmom, her brothers worked there, her nephews worked there, her father retired from there, so it was very, very family oriented.
What out, what outside of work did you do? Were the things that you did with other BorgWarner employees, was one of these things where the only family friends you had really, you were this kind of closed little community of BorgWarner workers where y'all did things together outside of work?
BorgWarner put on a lot of activities. I can remember when I was younger, at around Christmas, they would rent out the movie theater hall and show movies for all the kids. And then when we come out, they'd have big bags of candy and stuff for us. They owned Springwater Park. They would have picnics yearly there. And we could swim, we could fish, play basketball, baseball. As far as when I started working there and hanging out, there were a few guys, and unfortunately, because of the things I was into, the marijuana and the alcohol, the guys that I hung out were into the same thing. So yeah, we hung out outside of work, but it was usually leaving work going straight to the bar. So not necessarily the right activities, but BorgWarner as a union, as a group of men, women, children, we were very tight-knit. I mean, we did a lot of things together. The memories I have, like I said, of growing up and the movies and the activities out at Springwater Park, I'll probably never forget. And they had summer days there where they'd open up the shop to the families, and you could go in and see where your father worked and what he actually did, and that's kind of what got me into it, really. Going there younger and seeing, I remember when they first came out with the Dodge Viper, they had one right there in the middle of the showroom, and I thought that was just the coolest car ever. And, thinking, wow, these men and women that work here had, built that transmission, helped put that car together. And the fact that they were really fast helped too. So, but yeah, we were, I recall a lot of times when my dad especially was a union steward, there were people that would show up on our doorstep. Saturdays, Sundays, it didn't matter. 3 o'clock in the morning, and our door was always open to them. And I have a lot of respect for that, and I don't know that all the other union leaders were like that, but my dad was. And that's why a lot of people came to him, because they knew that he'd stand up for them, that he would take care of whatever issue, and it may not even be work related. They may have needed a couple $100s to pay a bill that they were going to be short on till payday. And if he had it, he'd have given it to them. He'd have given them the shirt off his back. That's what union's about. That's what the whole gist of it. It's a family thing. Just like if I needed something right now, I could go to my dad and say, Dad, I need this. And blood, sweat, tears, whatever it took, he'd make sure that I had that. So yeah, it's a very family-oriented thing.
Was when you got a job, was BorgWarner the best job in town, to your knowledge, in terms of money and benefits?
Oh, by far, when I started working at BorgWarner, it was definitely the best job, hands down. I mean, the buddies of mine that I went to school with, were all envious, Here I am, I think I was probably 20, 21 at the time, driving around a brand new pickup truck. My wife's driving around a new car. I got a house. My kids are wearing the best of the best. Yeah, at the time, New Venture Gear was still there, but they were already on their way out, and then we seen that coming. Um, so yeah, at the time, I mean, BorgWarner, you know, unless you're going to be a doctor or a lawyer or, you know, something of that nature, here in Muncie, by far, that's the best job that there was. And you know, there were people asking me, you know, to get them applications, to, you know, get them in, and at first I tried, and then I told them I don't know that that's necessarily the best thing for you, you know, because I knew, I mean, you know, they knew it was coming, and they tried to prep people the best they could. So you know, I tried to let them know I don't know that necessarily that's the best place for you. You know, I hate to see you work there for 6 months and then, you know, get a taste of it and then never see it again.
We've kind of heard that from, or I've heard that from a lot of people, that the company kind of tried to brace everybody for the fact that they were closing, and how a lot of workers just didn't believe it.
Mm-hmm.
Is that kind of a common story? What were you told when you were working there? And that was 2003, you said, or 2002 that you used
Mm-hmm.
last time?
Yeah, I started working there. Well, no, let's see. I started working there, I believe it was in 95. So it had been 95 through like 98. But when I started working there, about a year and a half into the job, they had a meeting. Corporate started telling everybody about all this money that they were losing. And so, yeah, they were bracing people then. You know, they were telling them then, hey, you know, we're losing all this money. We're going to have to cut costs. And when they sold the transmission side to Tremac, Mexico, that cut about half the jobs there, which got me because, you know, I'd only had 3 years in. So, but yeah, the company did. I mean, they did try to brace people and let them know it was coming. And there were a lot of people walking with their heads in the clouds saying, oh, this isn't going to happen. You know, and they did offer, and I'll give them this, they did offer training. You could go, you know, they were willing to send you, and this is all actually from the government, you know, because of the huge layoff. They were willing to send people back to school for specified training, to try to help out, you know. And again, that was something, you know, I was 23, 24 years old. I didn't take advantage of it, you know. At that point in my life, and this sounds stupid, especially as I look at it now and I'm 36, but at that point in my life, I'm thinking I'm too old to go back to school. And I've got 2 kids and a wife, and I need to support them, you know. And how am I going to support them if I go back to school full time? And again, knowledge is power, because knowing the things I know now, if I'd have known, you know, 13 years ago when I was, you know, thought I knew it all, I'd have done things a lot differently. But it's all in the past. I don't live with any regrets. You know, I made the decisions and did the things that I did. And now I'm just trying to move on and make the best for my family. But the company really did try to set people up in the mind frame that this isn't going to last forever, you know. And I guess for me, it really sunk in when Dad and I were talking one day, and he said, you know, I don't even know if I'm going to be able to retire from there. And at this point, he had 22, 23 years in. But like I said, my parents are divorced, and my dad remarried, and I've got a sister that's the same age as my oldest daughter, and a little brother that's 2 years younger than they are. He's 15 right now, and they're 17. So in essence, he started all over again. So he was really hoping to work there probably 40 years plus, which wasn't uncommon. There were a lot of guys like that. But he's seen it, and I guess seen it in his eyes and known, because I knew what his aspirations were of working there, his longevity. And when he told me that he just didn't think that he was going to be there much longer, that really opened my eyes, because I knew, hey, you know, he's got 25 plus years in. If he's not going to make it another 5, 10 years, there's no way I'm going to. So I started prepping myself a little bit, putting money aside. Of course, it just doesn't last, you know, when you go from making $18, $23 an hour to delivering pizzas, making $8 an hour plus tips and commission. It's just not quite the same. You know, I did the best I could, but it didn't work out. But yeah, I think company-wide, they really did try to let people know ahead of time, hey, this is real. It's going to happen. You know, and I think there were people with their heads in the cloud or heads in the sand, however you want to look at it, saying, well, I don't believe it, you know. But they believe it now, you know.
Wow, even in the mid to late '90s, they were prepping everybody, huh?
Mm-hmm.
Well, Rob, I mean, we've touched on everything that I really wanted to talk about today.
Okay.
As well as last time. Is there anything, you know, at this point, is there anything that we haven't talked about that you think needs to be captured for this oral history that you'd like to say?
No, I don't think so.
All right, Rob, we really appreciate it.
No problem.